And a very pleasant good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Marr, still battling a little infection here, but I think we will get over it with some antibiotics and what we've been taking. It's a little tough on the pipes, so the longer you spend with me as a co-host today, the better it really does feel. As we get underway today, personal memories of Muhammed Ali. Listeners, we have all of us in our own way said goodbye to Muhammad Ali. He was in the early part of his life after he beat Sonny Liston, when he was then Cassius Clay. He was very controversial, but he did have a sense of humor. And at the beginning, I was very upset, not by so much that he changed and became a member of Islam. He was now a devotee of Islam, of Louis Farrakhan, but he was in a very peaceful sect. He wasn't in one that hated white people, and before it was all over with, he really did love America. He was heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken, when he went to it to see it, and he was weak at that point. He could barely speak his voice, and he had Parkinson, and he was heartbroken at Ground Zero when he went to New York. Absolutely heartbroken at Ground Zero. It was 20 years ago, this year in Atlanta, that then Muhammad Ali, suffering with Parkinson's disease, lit the flame for the Olympics in Atlanta. That was a very moving time for me personally, because at that time, I had known that he had won the boxing champion, and then I was upset when he wouldn't register for the draft. But he was a man of his word, and he didn't, and he had about a 3-year period where he fought legally. He was not allowed to continue boxing. But he did make appearances on behalf of himself. Now, he has been to Baltimore any number of times, and I saw things in the Sun paper story about when he visited here and saw various people and things of that nature, but I'll never forget seeing him myself. There was a show on the old WFBR called Sportsline when we were at 13 East 20th Street. It was done by the late Jim Carvelis. Now, Jim might have a relative that may have been there that night, but I was then working the night shift as a newsman. And Sportsline went on from 7 until 8 o'clock. And, of course, I had the 6 o'clock news, and I don't even, in those days, maybe a headline newscast at 6:30, and then nothing during the 7 o'clock hour. So after 6:30, all of a sudden I hear the doors going, and I have to get up and go to the door, and I look down, and who's there? Well, it's Muhammad Ali. And I went flying down the steps, opened it up, and I said, "Hello, champ, how are you?" And he said, "I'm okay." I said, "It's going to be a couple of minutes before you have to go on, so you might have to spend a little time with me." And he said, now he's behind me at this time, and I'm leading him up to the top of the steps. And there were quite a few steps, too. He said, "Well, I don't know if I like you." So we got to the top of the steps, and I looked at him, and I said, "Muhammad, I think, for the most part, any time you meet somebody you don't know for the first time and don't have any idea what they're like, I don't think you dislike them." And then there was the little smile that kind of broke across his face. And then we, exchanged. I said, "How you doing? How's this thing going along? And what's going to happen?" And he was, he was very nice. And then he went in and spent the rest of the time with Jim Carvelis. And I never, I just always recall that. And when he left, I waved goodbye to him. He waved goodbye to me, and there was a smile then. And he was still in good shape. And I thought, well, I'll never see Muhammad Ali again. But I did. He came around to love America. And he knew it a little earlier on. He did change to become a Muslim, but he not in the same sect as Louis Farrakhan. It was in a very peaceful sect in Chicago. And as I mentioned earlier, when he came and saw the devastation of Ground Zero, he was heartbroken. I do remember that he fought at Capitol Center. And I had press credentials to go see that fight. This was a few years. He'd gotten his permission to fight back, and he was fighting in boxing again, and he fought at Capitol Center. And I took with me a brilliant lawyer who's now a federal judge. And we drove over, and we said, you might get a chance to see Muhammad Ali again. And the judge was then a lawyer named Marvin Garbus, and the two of us drove over to Capitol Center. And sure enough, there were a couple of different boxing matches, and Ali was in one, and we got to go into the locker room afterwards because the Judge Garbus was like my assistant that day. I wanted to introduce, if I could, I would really felt good because the judge he wasn't even a judge at that time. He was just a good friend. I wanted to introduce him to Muhammad Ali. And we walked in, and Muhammad, there were not that many reporters in there. It wouldn't be like today. Today, at the top of the heavyweight match, there'd be so many in there you wouldn't even be allowed to let him in. We got in, and suddenly he looked up and he saw me, and he said, he looked a little more, and he said, "How'd you get out of Baltimore?" And I said, "Well, when I told him I knew you, they allowed me to come out for the night, Muhammad." And he broke into a smile again, and then I can remember Judge Garbus said something to him, and he spoke back to Judge Garbus, and I don't think Marvin was ever happier to meet anybody in his entire life. And we weren't in there that long, and we said our goodbyes, and then kept track of him. He couldn't wait to get home when he would go overseas and come back to this country. And indeed, he grew to love the country. He will be buried in Louisville on Friday in the afternoon, about 2 o'clock. And I know he had a firm belief in Islam for all of the best reasons. And I do believe he is with the good Lord now. I just feel he's with the good Lord. He can, no matter your belief is, and I've gone pretty much after the Islamists pretty bad. A lot of people misunderstand my feeling, and they think I don't like Muslims. Just not true. Islamists I don't think I like. I think they're dangerous for our country. And there's a difference between a peaceful, loving Muslim, like Bill the Muslim, who calls here on occasion, and Muhammad Ali. But I never saw him again, never ran into him again. Spent time with Judge Garbus after that, and every time we'd see each other, if I saw him again today, and I haven't seen him for a number of years now, I'm sure that the good judge would recall that night we went to Capitol Center. He asked me what was I doing out of Baltimore, and then when I introduced Judge Garbus, I said he was my chaperone and my attorney, and he said, "Yeah, well, you need one. You need one." Then you can tell he didn't want to break into the smile, but he did. So that's just a story of Muhammad Ali. And believe me, when he refused to be inducted into the military, I was disappointed too. I really was. I can remember, when he beat Sonny Liston, and the odds are he wasn't going to beat him, and he beat a lot of other guys as well. But he did, and then he lost a few fights as well. But he did love this country. And America will say goodbye to him. Already have. A lot of people have privately. And they say goodbye to him officially this Friday. And I can't help but remember my own very few minutes. I had a bit of time with him. And like the New York Post said in an editorial, I'm just going to touch on part of it. By the time he died Friday night, at age 74, after a painful decades-long struggle with Parkinson. No one questioned the label he so confidently had given himself so long, the greatest. I am the greatest. But for all of his accomplishments in the ring, youngest man till then to win the heavyweight title, he did so much once he was out of the ring. He did so much for children. They were so glad to see him. He went so far, and he went around the world, but he did so much for charity and for kids who would just light up when they'd see him. And the kids would have problems, and he would spend time with them. And so we have said goodbye to him. George W. Bush presented him with the nation's highest civilian honor, the Medal of Freedom. You should know that, the Medal of Freedom. And he will be missed by many. And it's just, when I look back at it and recall those times when I was young, very, very young, and now I'm just the opposite. And here I go on and on and on without anybody being my co-host yet. But he wasn't a coward when he didn't believe in the draft. That was very disappointing, but he stayed with it, and he didn't apologize for it. And he did love America. And I think that he was a conscientious objector. He gave up an awful lot for it. He didn't have to do it, but he did. It kept him 3 years out of his career, which was a great one anyway. And he loved our country. He really, really did. And please, if you had a different opinion of him, try to think of how much he really did love America. Okay, folks, it is time for me to take a break.